But if you, as soon as you gate something, it's no longer available in this new world of how discovery happens with LLMs. And so we went and got rid of all the forms on our site. We only have two forms: schedule a demo and contact us.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today I'm joined by Bryan, the CEO of Elastic Path. And before that, he was a part of the founding team at Acquia and the chief commercial officer at Neural Magic. So he's someone who brings both a deep perspective in pipeline as well as a lived experience inside of a real AI company. And at the RevGenAI podcast, what we do is we focus on how B2B leaders are generating revenue in 2026 through AI, thought leadership, and ultimately how they're building practical go-to-market systems to lead to better pipeline execution. And today we're going to dive into how he's building Elastic Path and what's actually working to create trust in B2B market. Bryan, it's great to
Sure.
have you. Of
Yeah, it's great to be here, Maya. Thank you for having me on.
course. So let's just start. For anyone who doesn't know about Elastic Path, can you explain what you do, who you sell to, and the core problem that makes big companies like T-Mobile, Comcast, actually come to you?
Sure. So Elastic Path is a commerce software platform. So we provide the capabilities necessary to build a commerce storefront for an organization looking to sell online. And our specialty is essentially in sort of our specialty is in complex commerce scenarios where your product catalog either has lots of SKUs or lots of complexities associated with it. Your backend systems require a significant amount of flexibility to integrate seamlessly and deliver that through to a customer experience. Um, and so, we tend to focus on mid-market and enterprise customers for whom that complexity is a real important deciding factor. Typically, they're builders, um, and oftentimes many of our prospects have actually built their own commerce system and then sort of need to modernize that. They need modern APIs because they want to make content and data available to the LLMs. They want to sort of relieve themselves of the burden of sort of building basic commerce features and focus on their core competencies that differentiate their business. And so, we've been very successful at working with large organizations with complex commerce problems and help them build great experiences for their end customers, whether they'll be B2C or B2B.
Mm, I like the positioning, um, and understanding that most of your clients they have a complex uh issue that most other platforms aren't really solving, and you're modernizing the actual use of how AI agents, for example, can interact and help deliver more solutions. I'm curious, like, what if you had to distill, like, what is the main pain point that they respond to when they hear it that is actually like helping them raise their hand or approach you for a solution?
So it tends to be associated with complex catalog requirements. So one of our customers is a company called Serena and Lily. They're a custom furniture designer, right? And so they, have premium furniture, and most of their design experience happens in a design store with an individual, right? When you spend thousands of dollars on a couch, you get a lot of choices in that in terms of materials, fabrics, design styles, like accents, things like that have what have you that go into the design of that. And so um, typical commerce system allows you to sort of create what we call variants, like 200 variants for a particular product. But in their world, they have thousands of variants that are available, and you can buy a piece of furniture that might have 1,500 choices in the assembly of that furniture, right? And so there aren't any commerce systems out of the box that before Elastic Path that offered the ability to support those. And so what that meant was you were in doing custom development work to support your unique business needs. And so we really saw the opportunity to productize through this sort of catalog capabilities, um, an offering that enabled organizations that have complexity in their catalog to use a product that's off the shelf, and focus on their unique business differentiation rather than sort of building the commerce pieces on their own. And so that's really, we've seen that play. I have a HVAC um, manufacturer and distributor, and the level of technical specification that they require when someone's making a decision around an actuator is mind-boggling, right? But it has to work in very specific environments, and so it's another great example of that's a catalog scenario that we can handle out of the box really, really well that most commerce platforms are not designed for.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, I mean, I think it really helps when you've really understood the pain points of your ideal client profile and really can communicate that so well that when you're sharing that, they just feel understood, and that's kind of a core element that I've learned is what builds trust. So, thank you for bringing those examples. I'm really curious about your background because I saw that you were a founding team member at Acquia, and you helped scale it to past 170 million. Um, I'm curious, what did you bring from that pipeline building playbook that you're actually replicating in Elastic Path, and what parts of like that experience did you need to unlearn and change so that you could actually, grow this new venture?
Sure, sure. Yeah, I mean, my experience at Acquia was really interesting, because Acquia was a commercial open source company that was aligned with an existing open source project, Drupal, the CMS. And so, a big part of what we had to figure out in that world was we knew that there was huge opportunity for Drupal in the market, and it just needed a growth engine behind it. Um, but the but what was interesting is there was a existing ecosystem around Drupal of web developers and implementation shops that would manage it. And so the biggest challenge in the early days was finding the right problem to solve. There was this problem to solve for customers as well as the ecosystem around Drupal, delivered value on both sides, right? And we didn't get it right the first time. We thought it was support, sort of the Red Hat model, enterprise support. But it turns out that was directly in conflict with the ecosystem because they also retainer contracts to support your Drupal site. And so, we came upon cloud hosting, which was a problem for both sides of the scenario. We were early adopters of AWS and one of the biggest early ISVs on AWS. And so then we created a value proposition that worked for everyone in the ecosystem, and the company just took off. I think that the biggest thing that I learned there, and it was so clear in that ecosystem, was education really ultimately ends up being the best marketing because it was sort of it was rising tide raises all boats scenario. We used to do, I used to run a webinar program. We'd have 3 webinars a week, and when webinars were a thing, but it was all about tell us the story of how you built a thing, how you solved a problem, how you accomplished it, right? There's no selling, there's no products. It wasn't about us selling. It was just showcasing people who are doing really interesting things. And I used to get hundreds of people on every one of those sessions calling in from all over the world, which was awesome and sort of fascinating to watch. And sort of I had relationships with people in the chat in like a Zoom webinar or whatever it was at the time, um, who would come week in and week out because it was this learning experience. And so that's something that I've tried to replicate at Elastic Path, and is very focused on sort of a clear value exchange in terms of the information that you deliver, as part of your efforts to tell the story of what's possible with your software. And I think people really appreciate that. I see a lot of engagement. I'm very active on LinkedIn around that. Um, I think the thing that's probably changed the most is the selling motion, and it's been sort of amazing over the course of my career how enterprise B2B selling has changed and evolved. There was a time we used to joke, my CEO at Acquia at the time used to joke like, oh, we used to sell deals based on a PowerPoint, and large deals. And I was like, yeah, but all those people got fired because they bought software based on a PowerPoint, right? Nobody trusts that anymore, right? And so, now it's very much people do all of their research before they contact you as a vendor, right? So you assume they come in with some level of education. So therefore you need to generate mechanisms by which they can complete their research, and contribute to that. And then two is it's sort of trust but affirm, right? Like people want to have hands-on experiences with software before they go and make significant commitments to a vendor. And it's funny because I would go around and ask our technical teams, like, when you buy software, how do you do it? And it was very clear. Oh, we want a free trial, we want a POC, we want to prove that it works, we want hands on keyboard, try it, and then we'll, confirm what we want to do. But at the time, we weren't selling that way at all. In fact, we felt great if we sold software to a customer who never saw it and never touched it. And I'm like, this is blowing my mind. Like, that's insane. And so I've changed all of the go to market practices now, focus on technical buyers and hands-on experiences and POCs, because I know, I'm confident that our product does what we say it does and can deliver that, and people can see it and feel it. And then it becomes a very different conversation. But that's a very different selling motion in some ways than what we were doing in 2008, 2010, if you will.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, you did a great job just explaining how things have shifted, but like focusing on the principles of like first and foremost understanding what problem you're solving,
Hmm.
and then there's things that don't really change. Like when it comes to people just gravitating towards a success story and the story that you share around that, kind of extending that and growing the success. And then you highlight something that for me, I love this idea of, yes, people are doing more and more research now using AI, but you have to almost orchestrate the process of researching, which I had never thought about that, but how you need to facilitate that so that, I mean, this is what GEO now is about, right? Is
Yeah,
like is seeding
exactly.
the AI with all the information about your business, but really being able to facilitate the process of the way buying behavior works these days.
Yeah. and- I mean, maybe just to build on that, like, when I first started in Acquia, and even before that, everything from a marketer was behind a form, behind a gateway, right? And it was like, and you were solving for the marketing KPIs. How many form fills did we get? How many leads came from the form fills? How many opportunities, right? But if as soon as you gate something, it's no longer available in this new world of how discovery happens with LLMs. And so we went and got rid of all the forms on our site. We only have two forms: schedule a demo and contact us. And those are for people we call hand raisers, right? They're ready to have a conversation. Everything else is freely available, because we want individuals as well as agents to consume that information to drive the process of discovery that's happening, even when we don't see it per se. And then the other thing we did is we got rid of all these sort of feel good KPIs that actually didn't yield results.
Mm, yeah, I really like the way you're seeing things and how you're kind of shaping the your go-to-market approach. So you mentioned that you're narrowing the ICP and you're optimizing for raisers.
Hmm.
What do you see is actually working right now to generate more pipeline with skeptical buyers? Is it really just like the technical, um, you know, proof that you have that your solution is better, or is it still some form of branding, or what do you really kind of break it down as actually working in your viewpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think the reality of marketing, it's a little bit of all the things. Brand matters, right? And so, we have great customer stories that are reflective of our brand, that are well understood and seen in the market, right? So it's this combination of brand plus customer stories, plus, we've created a lot of content for technical buyers. One of the things that's interesting in commerce is, because it's about dollars and cents, there's a belief that, and that business is the buyer for this. And what we found over and over again, it was always an IT led sale. Business is involved in the business stakeholders are involved in the decision, certainly, and you have to uh, communicate with them effectively. But at the end of the day, IT runs the system. It's software. It's a platform that needs to be bulletproof and up all the time. So, accepting the fact that those are the actual buyers that you need to, what do they need has been a sort of somewhat of an unburdening, right? Because when you're selling to the wrong audience, doesn't matter how good you are, they're not the one making the decision at the end of the day. And so sometimes you know it's always funny with as I reflect back on my career, sometimes the it's sort of the Occam's razor problem. The simplest answer is sitting right in front of you, but like you don't trust it for some reason. And so turns out it's actually the simple answer is the true one. And we've gone through periods where we resisted that for various reasons.
I think you're touching a point that I know that a lot of business leaders can reflect on, is that sometimes you're off with your positioning. You've started your go-to-market approach trying to target who you think is going to get
Hmm.
value from this, but really, like, if you look at actually how the decision was made and who the buyer is, you need to readjust. And I think it's really smart that you did that, and you used a great word of just like unburdening, because when you can have that clarity and just execute with clarity of who you're trying to sell to, everything else just works so much better.
I was just gonna say, I mean, one of the things that I pass along, and it's I remember this very vividly in my own career when I discovered it, is that one of the traps for a leader is falling in love with your own ideas, right? Right, you've had success through your career, you've advanced, right? And it's easy to believe your own BS, if you will. And so this willingness to let go of it and just really test it. And if it doesn't work, so be it, right? Like that's the sort of iterative approach to finding what works is ultimately what makes great leaders. But you have to there's sort of this ego piece. You have to let go of things in order for that to happen. And it's not as it's easier said than done for sure.
I can relate to that. I think it's easy to take things personally in a business and
Hmm.
also be
Hmm.
attached to what
Exactly.
because you're putting so much energy in creating something, it's very difficult to see it from an objective lens. So I think that that's
Exactly.
like so important, especially when it comes to just adapting to the way the industry is changing with AI and everything behaving differently right now. I do want to
Hmm.
ask, because you have such a unique perspective of being both very experienced in go to market, but also very experienced in AI and actual AI companies, machine learning. I- If you could wave a magic wand and solve one growth issue for Elastic Path over the next year, like what would be the core thing that you would focus on?
I think at this point we've gotten really good at um, once we identify a hand raiser, how to manage the process, right? And how to engage with them and lead them through a process to adeptly evaluate our technology and make a decision. I think we're exceptional at that. We've gotten really good over the last 12 to 18 months at that. So if I can wave the magic wand, I was going to scale the top of the funnel to get more hand raisers, right? And that's the conversation we have all the time, right? And one of the things that's interesting in this sort of era of AI is in in the old days, sort of earlier in my career, all problems could be solved by throwing money at it. It'd be hire more people or spend more money in marketing, go to more events, have more dinners, right? Hire more PR firms. And what's interesting is more money is no longer rewarded, right? Because we're no longer in the ZERP era, but also um, it actually forces you to be more creative and innovative when you sort of the money is the constraint, right? And so in some ways I like operating operating with that as the core constraint because it really unlocks my team members' creativity, right? And and obviously you have people that can thrive in that environment, and I feel like we've built a great team that can do that. But it's the constraint of sort of unlimited, not having access to unlimited resources and not able, you don't want to go out and raise another round, and for for lots of reasons. It's what are you going to do then, right? Under within these constraints, I had read a great Keith Richards quote. He's a guitar player for the Rolling Stones. He was like, "The blues is the constraint. It's 12-bar blues, right?" And so it's what the creativity comes is what you do within that constraint, not the fact that you're forced into a constraint. And I think that really applies in sort of our go-to-market efforts. Is how do we find creative, innovative solutions? So in old days, and certainly with previous leaders, we didn't have to because we just threw money at the problem. But money, and I've seen this over and over again in my career, tends to make people lazy, right? And just keep sort of churning, right? We can spend more on Google ads or LinkedIn ads or whatever. That's not creative. That's just, more is more.
Mm. Yeah, I think especially like being resourceful and being able to make more from what you have, the limited resources that you have is such an important skill in entrepreneurship.
Hmm.
I think that that's a really great takeaway. Um, and I am just curious that to understand if if you've identified that the top of funnel is really the constraint, like what stops you from being able to expand? Is it trust with cold audiences, or is it messaging clarity, or what do you think it is?
I think honestly, I kind of think it's a reach problem. I think one of the challenges in our market, and this probably isn't unique to commerce, but sort of it's a big effort to go from one commerce platform to another, whether it be from existing commercial off the shelf product to new commercial off the shelf, whether it's DIY to a product like Elastic Path, whatever the situation might be. Um, so therefore, a tiny fraction of the market is in market at any given point in time, right? And so, you know, how do you sort of identify the people that are actively in market looking for a solution, get in front of them and engage in a conversation such that they go through a consideration process. That I think scaling that is probably the biggest challenge that we have. And I think it's true of everyone in our market. If you look at our public comparables, their growth rates are exceptionally low right now, because of this challenge. I think, and I think there's a little bit of sort of a post-COVID hangover in our market because during 21, 22, everyone out and bought a commerce, right? Because people couldn't go to the store. So there was a ton of buying activity, and now we're sort of processing that. And so, early indications suggest that might be changing. But that's different. That's a change in this market. Market was like every 5 years, reliably, people would re-platform to a new technology, and that has slowed down significantly.
Yeah, I think in sales you're always kind of fighting the status quo, and even with AI,
Hmm.
people are so resistant that I think it will still take years until it really becomes the mainstream. Like what you and I are experiencing, and what I know some of our listeners are experiencing, hasn't been adopted by 99% of the population yet. So it's really
For sure.
fascinating about how everything is going to change. And thank you, Bryan, for sharing your perspective and these practical takeaways. I think people can learn a lot from your experience. For anybody who wants to reach out to Elastic Path or to you personally, where's the best place for them to connect with you?
Best place is on LinkedIn. I'm available there. So check out my profile. I think it's /bhouse. Or check us. Come reach out via elasticpath.com. Both of those are good pathways for me to get in touch with me.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Bryan.
Yeah, Maya, thank you.